Hi, my name is Michael Carolan. I was born in Kansas City, Missouri in 1966, and today I live in Belchertown, Massachusetts, near Amherst, and I teach writing at Clark University in Worcester, Mass. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about this guy here, and that is Michael Carolan. And he's the guy I was named after, supposedly. And my father and mother liked that name, and my father knew that there was a Michael in the family tree. And it wasn't until I was about 22 years old that, and I'd moved from Kansas City. I was in exile on my own. I moved from Kansas City to Alexandria, Virginia, where I took a job, and I found a book called The Famine Immigrants, and it was a 4-volume collection with a million names probably of the famine immigrants, and I knew Carolan was a weird, odd name, and so I looked up the name Carolan in this book, and sure enough I found Michael Carolan and his father Thomas. And so the story is that in June of 1847, June 23rd was when they left Liverpool. So right before June of 1847, what must have happened in Kells is things were very bad, and Thomas, who is Michael's father, took Michael and his wife Elizabeth and Michael, who was 2 years old at the time, and Michael's 4-year-old sister Catherine, and his 1-year-old infant sister Annie, and an older sister or cousin, I couldn't tell which, Elizabeth, who was 13, and they walked, I believe, to Drogheda, the port, to get over to Liverpool. And in Liverpool, on June 23rd of 1847, they got on board a pretty nice ship called the Patrick Henry. And from what I can tell, it was nice because it came to New York. And so they had to have some money to get the passage, and I'm not sure how. They left Thomas's older brother, Michael, on the property. It was 16 acres of land they were renting from a guy by the name of Nicholson right outside of Kells in the Bury parish. And they were also renting about less than an acre in Drumbara, which is right outside of Kells. And they were renting that from a guy by the name of Woodward. And I do know that Nicholson later, there was an assassination made on Nicholson's life, so I don't think he was a very good landlord. Anyway, the brother stayed, Michael, the brother stayed, but Thomas and this part left. And I know that from the Griffiths records. Anyway, they made their way to New York, and then they went directly to Philadelphia. And they settled north of Philadelphia in a place called Willow Grove. And I found the actual place in Willow Grove, and I visited there with my father, William Carolan. And we visited there last year. I took him to Willow Grove, where we visited. Oh, and I can show you what they first saw when they arrived in America, and that is the offices of Grinnell, Minturn and Company, and that is at Burling Slip in New York City. That would be the first building they saw when they arrived in America. Because that's who owned the boat, and the captain, as you heard from the essay, was Delano. Captain Delano was a great uncle of FDR. And at any rate, when they got to America, they went straight to Willow Grove, and they must have known someone there, I'm assuming. And here's an old map of Willow Grove. And you can see on the map through the census records, I was able to ascertain exactly where the Carolans lived, the young Carolan family, and they lived right at this corner here. You won't be able to see it, but I'll point to it. It's a nondescript house, picture of a kind of at the corner there, and it was between a hotel, and I've ascertained that from the census records, and I did obviously a lot of research to find out. And I went to that intersection. It doesn't look anything like it now. At any rate, so the Carolans came, and they settled, and then they moved. Michael, then something happened to the old family, and it was told to me by my aunt that that he died, the father, and I did find his record. The father, Thomas, died in 1870 of consumption. And so, but before that, there was a big missing gap. And so I did some research and I found out that the little Michael Carolan was 16 and his sister, they were broken up as a family in the 1860s, right around the time of the Civil War. And that they were living with a Quaker by the name of George Spencer. And George was living with his wife, and they were very old, and they had also taken in a Negro, because I found that from the census records. So they were very kind of liberal Quakers who were known to help slaves out on the Underground Railroad. Anyway, Michael was living there with his sister when he was 16, and then in the 1860 census. And then by 1870, Michael had married at the Immaculate Conception Church in Philadelphia, in Jenkintown, married a woman, an Irish immigrant named Anna. And over the next 30 years, Anna would birth 18 children, and 6 of them would live. So they moved from Jenkintown, Willow Grove area into Philadelphia, where Michael set up a blacksmith shop. And it basically at 5th and Rising Sun Avenue. And he ran a blacksmith shop there at that intersection for years. And I found the maps of all that, and every time a child would die, he would take the child, many infants died, and they would take them right over to the New Cathedral Cemetery in Philadelphia and bury them throughout the 1880s and even into the 1890s. But anyway, the eldest son lived, and his name was Matthew William, who you heard about in the essay I read. And Matthew William then was my great-grandfather. And Matthew William then had Walter Charles, who was my grandfather, and then Walter Charles had William, and so on. So the family name was just luckily able to stay alive because of that one son, Matthew William, the oldest son, who was born in 1870 in north of Philadelphia, and that's how that line of the family survived. And a friend was joking to me that I was doing genealogy with, and he laughed and he said, you know, the only thing the Irish left each other were their names, which I thought was really funny in America, because I really don't have any physical things from the day. And so at any rate, that's really the story of Michael and his wife, Annie Lawrence, I think was her last name, and they were the Irish who stepped off the boat and made a new life in this country. And then the son, Matthew William, then was a pipe fitter and a tradesman. And then my grandfather, his son, Walter Charles, became an engineer, went to Drexel, got a college degree, became an engineer, and went out to Kansas City. And that's where my father was born in Philadelphia, but he took my father as a young kid out to Kansas City, and that's where I was born. In Kansas City, my father was an engineer, and my brother's an engineer, and I am the writer. So I'm the oldest of 5 kids. And so we didn't really know much about our Irish heritage until my uncle came over with a bottle of Carolan's Irish cream liqueur. And this was probably 1983, and he said, hey, we're Irish, here's some Irish cream liqueur, and we all got excited about it. So that also helped start me off. And I wanted to mention one other story about the Irish in our family, and that is a guy by the name of Robert Cooey, which would have been my my paternal grandmother's father. So he would be my great-grandfather as well, Robert Cooey. He was 10 years old when he arrived in America in May of 1851 with his older sister Isabella, and the last name is spelled Cooey. And they arrived in Philadelphia right off of the ship, the Provincialist was the name of the boat. And so he came here, and his father came a little later, and his father set up a tanning shop in Philadelphia. And so he helped his dad out in the tanning shop with hides, and they were Moroccan leather people. So that's a particular leather that's very soft. And so Robert, when the Civil War started, decided that he wanted to be a U.S. citizen, and he heard that you could become a U.S. citizen if you joined up. So he joined up with the Army, was a private in the 29th Pennsylvania, and they had great adventures. And unfortunately, at the Battle of Gettysburg, I believe he did very well there. He survived, but he was shot in the shoulder. Boom, I think it was the left shoulder. Shot in the shoulder at Gettysburg, lay there for a while, was picked up and taken to a hospital at York, Pennsylvania, I believe, or somehow transferred to York, Pennsylvania, where he then, I don't know if he was honored, yeah, he was honorably discharged, and I got his papers and it said the date after he was discharged, he became a citizen. So he was very excited about that, and then he ended up becoming a leather factory owner, a very prosperous leather factory owner in Philadelphia. Had 100 employees at one time in Bridesburg. Their factory was in Bridesburg. They did kid glove leather, and they were very, very well-to-do. And he came from Newton Stewart in County Tyrone in Northern Ireland. So they were the Protestant part of the family, the Irish family. And so they joined the Protestant church, and so they were a little more well-to-do than the Carolan side of the family. And at any rate, it was his daughter who married the Irish from Meath. So we had the Meath Irish and the County Meath Irish marrying the or the descendants of the County Meath Irish marrying the descendants of the County Tyrone Irish, which only can happen in America. So, so that's about all I have for now, and I think that's it.